just kind of mentioned that sense of loss about holding the object. Just reminded me again of some of our sessions in it where we used to do a raisin type practice, but would start with 3 raisins and have the kind of exploration as you're looking. And we had them in a little plastic cup in those eco-insensitive days, and would ask people to look at the raisins and just notice the different kind of shapes of the 3 or so different raisins in the bottom of that cup. And a number of people who actually got quite attached. There'd be one they really liked, and then we get into this kind of dialogue with themselves. Well, do I want to eat and crunch up the one I've got a soft spot for? But that one over there, goodness, I don't like the look of that. And it was just fascinating just how quickly this kind of strong sense of liking, disliking, kind of attachment really came into just these 3 raisins that were in the bottom of the cup. So it's wonderful to notice that that's what we do, is in our connecting way as humans. So, okay, so what I'd like to do then is just to start to pick up some of these strands. In absolutely no way am I saying this is what anyone should be doing. This is just stuff that's come out from kind of working with myself and colleagues and just playing around with what could be done in the context of a kind of classic body scan. I think, though, there's some really helpful things that can fit into any form of body scan that's used. And one of them that I think is really important is just to be having that emphasis of choice, to be all the way through, inviting people to say that and I like the framing around, mindfulness is ultimately it's going to be about you making choices about kind of how you respond to what's happening in your life. And a really important choice we can make is when we started to engage in something that feels like it's not for us too much, kind of not sitting well. It can be a really important mindful choice to choose to back off, to move away from that. So it's a real moment of mindfulness to go, not sure I'm liking this. I'm going to choose to take my attention to something else. That, I would say, in the initial part of learning about mindfulness, because that I find that's really challenging to a lot of the ingrained habits we can have about pushing through, making ourselves do things. And I want to pick that up in the session I'm doing in June around that whole thing of how we frame the sense of staying with kind of difficulty, and at what point that becomes helpful to be inviting people to do that. And I question quite a bit how easy it is to do that right from the start in any way that's actually not going to be reinforcing existing patterns of pushing through, getting by. So that real emphasis of choice, and I love the framing of anything we do as giving it a test drive. Let's see what it's like, do a bit of that. And there's something just about that sense of, well, we're just testing it out. We're not doing it properly yet. So there's permission, I think, when we frame it that way, to kind of have feedback about it rather than it being kind of presented as a done deal. This is how it should be. So let's give this a go, see what you make of it. Some things may sit well, some things may not sit so well. Let's have some feedback around that, discuss that, and then when we do it again, we can maybe think about how any changes could come in that could make that feel a bit more kind of welcoming or easier to do. So that sense of how we're in a process of collaboration around this, rather than something being presented as a kind of as a fait accompli. It has to be this way. So I think those kind of framings can be really helpful. If before you've got to the body scan in a session, you've done some other practices around maybe just simple focusing in onto something, could be whatever focusing anchor it might be, then I think it's really helpful to invite people just to go back to something they've done before in the session, or maybe have done elsewhere if they find the body scan isn't kind of right for them. It's a mindful choice. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do something else. So all that setup, I think, is really helpful. But what I think also is really useful as a teacher is to break the kind of vast expanse of a body scan into smaller chunks. And I think that kind of questions maybe the notion of, if we're going to do something like a body scan, do we actually have to get through all the body? Is anything really untoward going to happen if we do part? Are people going to walk out of the room lopsided and bump into things because we haven't done the arms properly in some way or something like that? So it's that sense of the point, holding the aim of the body scan. It's a portal to greater embodied awareness, and having the capacity to focus in and focus away and focus in again through different areas of the body. But those skills can be learned in a small area, or they can be learned through the whole body. And maybe there's something about just kind of taking this incrementally that can be really helpful. So what I want to do is share an idea around that, which this could be done in any particular way, but I think it's quite useful to start with feet, because the feet are outside the innervation of your vagus nerve, and it's the vagus nerve in your body which carries the most sensory information back from the insides of your body and the surfaces of your body back into your kind of emotional brain networks to trigger strong sense of your kind of inner felt sense. The vagus nerve kind of peters out in the lower abdomen, and by the time you get to your feet, there's other kind of autonomic systems are bringing pretty low grade information back. So yes, some people will have experienced difficulties with the feet. They may have chronic foot pain, so there may be reasons why a foot isn't helpful. So you could possibly offer an invitation where I'm going to suggest we start with our feet with this practice, but you could use either hand, just substitute that in, or you could use some other kind of two areas of the body. And the other thing I should have said just before is, I think what's really helpful for any practice when people are starting off is to be really explicit about what's going to happen so they can make choices about that. So I'd be saying, so we're going to do a short practice where I'm going to invite you to bring your attention down to one foot. Notice some of the physical sensations there in your foot, like maybe the feelings of contact or temperature, maybe sense of movement, and then seeing how it is to shift your attention to the other foot and notice the same things there. And then after we've done that for both feet, we'll come back and kind of find out what you notice doing that. So a very short initial practice. So if you're comfortable doing this, finding a comfortable position. At any point as you do this practice, make those choices to kind of engage and disengage. You can always come back again if you wish, or focus on kind of doing something else. Just what kind of feels right for you. And maybe the hardest part of this practice could be choosing what foot to start with. So maybe just seeing what it's like to bring your attention into what's kind of happening there in one of your feet. And if you're kind of dithering around with others, we can often wonder which is going to be the one to start with. Just see what it's like to go for one. And whatever foot you do land in, as it were, maybe just noticing the sensations, physical sensations that are present with that one foot. Maybe noticing a sense of contact. You could even move your foot a little bit just to see if that kind of intensifies the sensations of contact. Helping you track different areas of the sole of your foot coming into contact with things. You can carry on moving your foot if you prefer, or let it go still at rest. Maybe there's a sense of temperature, warm or cool, somewhere in between. Maybe there's a sense of kind of contact with footwear as well. And then noticing what it's like to bring your attention back to what you're noticing there in your feet. each time your attention wanders off, as it probably will. Does it feel easy to come back? Is everything a bit vague then? It's kind of hard to know any of those sensations there at all. Uncomfortable, just kind of somewhere, not so sure. Or is it more vivid? So what it's like to come back to maybe the sensations there in the soles of the feet or somewhere else each time your attention wanders off. And then maybe noticing what it's like to shift your other foot and focusing in the sensations there. Again, you could kind of land there with making some movements, or maybe you're preferring to have your foot still. Maybe you notice your attention gets taken back to the first foot. Well, just notice that and bring it back to the second one there. And again, like before, noticing different types of sensations available, vague, vivid, not sure, coming and going. And each time your attention wanders off, as it's going to do, if nothing else, because I'm wittering on, distracting your attention, then how is it to bring your attention back once more to what you're noticing there? And then maybe just moving both feet around a bit, shifting maybe your position, stretching, moving, just bringing that to an end. So, and what I find really helpful, it wouldn't work so well with all the different screens here on this kind of Zoom call, but what I find really helpful to kind of introduce um, feedback is to do whole group quick feedback around that, just saying, asking questions and asking people to go kind of thumbs up if it's a yes, not so sure, thumbs down if it's a no. So I might ask people as a whole group with my hand up saying, so kind of who landed first with the left foot and who landed first with the right foot. So could be just doing very simple yes no questions just to kind of find out, oh yeah, some people ended up with different feet. Who struggled to think which foot to go for first? Yes, if you did, no, if you didn't. So kind of starting off with just, yeah, the stuff that's happening. Who noticed their attention wandered away from the feet at times? So most people are going to stick the thumb up. Who found the feet really vague and hard to notice anything there? So maybe it's a yes or no. Who noticed? Did anyone notice more sensations? Did anyone notice temperature? So and so on, just to be kind of getting this whole feel. Did anyone kind of find the whole thing a bit boring? Which is probably a low key thing to feel okay about saying. Did anyone find that just didn't like that at all? And you kind of did anyone find they really liked that and found that? So you're kind of making it possible through having ask lots of simple yes no questions just to kind of come in to set the scene that it's okay to be exploring this maybe, and then possibly from that saying some, we just had a brief check and I'm really curious about kind of some of the responses there. Would anyone say more or less about that? So you've kind of set the scene that it's possible to be exploring this. So I think something like that's really helpful, because if you notice anyone's really struggling, they're saying, when I did that, I just felt far too much, then maybe you can think about that if you are going to do some further body scans, maybe there's something else they did previously in the session. You can say, well, maybe you could be doing that. Or maybe just while we're doing this, just do come in to the little bits of it, but then just kind of see what it's like to be taking your attention elsewhere. For myself, I would prefer to have set up a previous mindfulness practice where we may have done a little bit of a listening to a sound, looking at something, holding an object maybe, so that people have a kind of home base anchor, as you could call it, to come back to work with that if they're finding something difficult in the body scan, but that might not fit all structures. What I'd like to do then is give an example of this looped body scan. I'm going to do this quite quickly because if you want to listen to the full thing, it's on the SoundCloud there. Um, but this idea of this looped body scan is just one way of approaching this. When in fact, the thing I want to talk about next is chunking. I think what's really helpful for body scans is to chunk them. So if you are going to do in that session, take someone through the whole of the body in some way, just break it up. So do perhaps legs and then have a brief feedback and a chance to move around a bit, having done legs. Then maybe do, I don't know, torso if you want to, and then stop that. Then maybe arms and head or whatever. Chunking it up with gaps in between means that if anyone's really struggling, they know that this is going to come to an end quite soon. And if you say that, we're going to do this in chunks. We're going to do some legs and then stop and see how that goes, and then and so on. Then people know that if it is difficult, they've only got they've only got from foot to hips of that difficulty. They've not got the whole bloody body to kind of get through in one go. So, and also as you as a teacher, you're getting feedback quickly, and you could be doing more of this thumbs up, down stuff, which is really fast. So you're not taking a lot of time with that necessarily, just getting a feel of it. And the wonderful thing with chunking it is that because people have moved around and maybe invited to have a mindful sip of water or whatever, then they stay awake as well. So rather than the folk who, for whatever reason, just like me, just will go off to sleep in a body scan, or unless I'm guiding it, I invariably fall asleep. So it's nice to have a sleep, but really, has the person's learning continued during that period of sleep? Or if they're awake for the whole thing, then they've got a whole period of being mindfully alert and engaged in the process. So moving around helps with wakefulness. So any form of chunking, I just think that is just, it just changes the whole feel of doing body scans, to be honest. It's fantastic. So but what I've kind of myself and Annette and others we've kind of worked with, would kind of what emerged from some of our kind of ways of working was this idea of a loop body scan, which I like because you're able to first of all visit. There's no right or wrong order, but the suggestion is to do a loop around one foot, upper leg, and across and down to the other foot. So you're looping around your legs. But then there's another really nice loop. You can go from one hand round to the other hand across the shoulders. And that means you've done probably two of the less likely to be kind of triggering areas where a lot of emotion tends to be felt. Not true for everyone, but you're doing this kind of more peripherally. And then the last loop can be maybe to be going from the sitting bones up the back, round the head, down the front, back to the sitting bones again. And that can be done really quickly if you're in a group where you just want to gauge the sense of what that might be, because as people, particularly as they come through the front of the body, often will come into contact with maybe very intense places of emotion that they've felt, and that may come into awareness quite quickly. Whereas if we do that with speed, then it's just to kind of whiz through and you kind of just noticing things in passing. And it's so if people know that's possible. So a nice way of doing this, I think, is if you can set up the notion of a kind of home base, a kind of an anchor practice before doing this, which could be, they know they can listen out for sounds, they know they can look at something, they can be holding an object. If you've done something like that, holding an object practice before doing a body scan, they could hold the object again, have it in their hand while they're doing the body scan to dip into. So if I was offering this, I want to kind of briefly kind of sketch out what the leg loop might be like, to give a feel of that. So I'd be inviting people to be doing this, I would suggest, in a sitting position. I often would, in a group, offer body scans in the position people are most familiar with, and sat down tends to be quite a familiar position in many cultures. If it's a group who's used to lying on the floor, often like working with kids who just, or teenagers, they'll just go on the floor for any excuse. So that's kind of much more normal. But for adults, quite a big thing to be on the floor with other people. So I'd often do it in the session in a chair, but then invite them, if they wish, to do it lying down at home, so they can then notice the difference and what they prefer. So you're kind of staging the newness of being kind of on the ground. And it also means you're not having to lug around loads of cushions and mats and all of that, which my intrinsic laziness really appreciates the underlying educational rationale for not having a car full of mats. So the so I'd be doing this in a sitting position and invite people. Maybe we're kind of going to do the like we did just there with the feet before, just going from one foot to the other. But this time we're going to go kind of from one foot to the other via going up one leg, cross the sitting bones down into the other leg, and see what it's like doing that. So if you want to give that a bit of a go, again, choosing to stop at any time. What I suggest we do when we start off this, though, is if you can kind of take your attention back to what we've done before, that kind of home base type of anchor. Maybe it's that object you were holding before, or if you just know, I'm assuming you've all had got some experience of mindfulness in some way, but if you're familiar with listening to sounds, or it could be looking at an object or feeling the breath in your body, whatever you find is a helpful kind of steadying anchor, to spend a couple of minutes, a few moments in this case, connecting into that. And noticing how it is to take your attention to the fine details of that particular anchor you've chosen. And when your attention wanders away from that, bring your attention back once more to that particular chosen anchor. And knowing throughout this whole practice, if it feels right for you at any point, you can bring your attention back to this home base, as it were, and just skip whatever else is going on until maybe you want to dip back into the loop around the legs we're doing. But if you don't, staying with that or doing something else that feels right for you. So again, that mindful choice, noticing what feels right for you right now. And then, as I say, knowing you can come back to this home base, or elsewhere if you prefer at any time, seeing what it's like to take your attention down into one of your feet. You might want to start off with the same one you used before. And having landed in there, again, just noticing those sensations. Again, they may still be as vague as they were, vivid or not sure, some changes may have happened. How is it to focus in and each time you find your attention wanders off, coming back to what you're noticing there. Maybe having a sense of your whole foot, different sensations there, temperature, contact, feeling of any footwear, sense of the position, any movements that are happening. So any time you find your feet, your legs are kind of shifting around, fidgeting somewhere, it's absolutely fine. There's no requirement to have your legs still for this practice. You're just noticing what sensations are there, still or moving. It's all good. And then maybe noticing how it is to shift your attention away from your feet and take it up into the calves and the shins and the ankles. It's the lower part of the leg there. Noticing maybe if there is anything here that stands out, often a bit vague. Could be the feeling is different at the front of the leg to the back, or any sense of clothing or temperature maybe around, who knows. Maybe taking your attention up into your knees now, again, that sense of noticing what it's like to shift your attention, lifting your attention out to the lower leg, bringing it into what you're noticing there in your knees. Sometimes knees can have a bit of discomfort around, and make those choices about whether you want to stay there, if that's the case, or take your attention maybe back to your home base or elsewhere. And then maybe noticing difference. Sometimes the kind of soft back of the knee can feel different to the front of the knee, the sides. And then through the upper leg, shifting your attention, maybe to land on the sense of the sitting bones, that leg sitting bone where you're in contact with the chair. Maybe some sense of your lower back there as well, but that sense of the top of that leg. And as ever, if you find your attention's wandering off elsewhere, just noticing that and gently coming back to what you can notice there in that sitting bone of the leg. And then shifting over to the other one. So noticing what it's like to shift legs, swap over to the other sitting bone, and maybe other sensations of being in contact with the chair there. Tuning in to what's there, coming back when your attention wanders. And then shifting your attention from there down through the upper leg to land in the knee of that leg. Maybe just briefly noticing what's there, sides, front, back. Maybe seeing what it's like to be a little kind of move through these areas more quickly. So now going down into the shins, the calves, the ankle. What's going on there? Just briefly landing that area, feeling what it's like to shift away from the knee, to turn your attention in there. And then maybe from your ankle down into your whole foot, what's going on in there? I don't know, maybe to finish off with maybe picking out a fine detail, something really focused in somewhere on your foot. Could be the feeling in tip of one toe or the heel, or just the ball of the foot, somewhere that you just feel, yeah, just in there. What's it like to really focus in? And then having scanned your attention, take your attention around both legs, maybe just seeing what it's like to hold both legs in your awareness, broadening out. You may find your attention kind of loops around or flips from one to the other. It's holding both legs at the same time in some way. No right or wrong way for this. You're just seeing what it's like to have your whole both legs and feet in your awareness. What's that like? And with that more kind of open awareness, what happens when your attention drifts off? Is it similar from when it was focused in or different in some way? What's it like to come back to that whole leg awareness? And then maybe doing a little bit of mindful movement, maybe just start to move your legs. So just bring some small movements and really tracking the changing sensations in your legs as you move. Maybe shifting your body weight slightly, maybe from one sitting bone to the other. Just getting the sense of that movement, really noticing how it is to have movement in those legs. How it is to come back to that sense of movement. Maybe shifting your whole body, have a bit of a stretch, move around. Maybe you could be opening your eyes, having a look around. If you want to have a mindful sip, it can be quite nice if you've got a drink nearby to just have a little bit of a sip. Really notice the movements as you bring the drink up, having a sip of it, bring it down. Really being kind of mindfully attentive to what's happening. So we could at this point go into a bit of a check-in, just find out how people were, or we could, what's quite nice then is to make contact again with that kind of home base anchor and then go from one hand across to the other hand and both arms and hands. Then maybe again a bit of a move, a shift, can be a mindful one if we're not wanting to kind of break the whole practice, we just want to shift from one chunk to another. But the very fact we're moving and shifting around kind of opens up this possibility of coming back into wakefulness and gives a kind of breathing space. And you're really anchoring in the permission of that home base. I realized I didn't might not have said to no, you can move at any time through this as well. So that could be another thing to be offering in. So that's one possibility, but I just wanted to, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do and wouldn't fit everyone, but it's kind of interesting, maybe as an example of chunking and the notion that we could, for instance, if kind of time's pressing in a group, we could just say, well, we're going to do legs this week, so let's just do a leg loop, and maybe their home practice is to give leg loops a go if they wish. And then maybe you could say there's an arm and kind of torso loop if you want to give those a go, but up to you. What we're practicing here is taking our attention through areas of the body, and we're noticing what it's like to focus in, come back, purposefully redirect to another area, focus in, come back. We're practicing that, and we're noticing the changing sensations through different areas of our body as we're doing that. And also the great thing about this loop thing is you can be saying to people, if there's a loop, you're not that keen on, you can repeat another one. You could just do kind of a couple of legs and one arms because you don't fancy doing the torso yet. Or so all kinds of possibilities around that. Okay, so that's kind of all I wanted to be sharing this evening. I just want to be open to any kind of questions. They're very welcome if you want to come in with your audio or come in with the chat. So yeah, just really interested in your thoughts about that. This may be a fantastic evening where you've discovered yet another way you'd never want to do a body scan again, which is interesting too. So kind of interested in what you make of those ideas, really. And any experiences you have around this would be really interesting to share as well. Yeah, Louise. Oh, lovely to see you, Louise. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, that was great. Thanks, Tim. And I realised that, well, I've been doing chunking in my practice, but I didn't have a word for it. So I'm going to. So I love the phrase chunking. That's fantastic, and I'll be using that from now on. So thank you very much.
I think borrowed from kind of education and NLP. I think are the great chunkers in this, in this world. Cheers, Louise. And someone else I can see likes the chunking as well. Any other reflections or thoughts on any of that? Also kind of interested to think of other ideas here you find would fit well, or any ideas that you think, not so sure they may not fit so well.
I found the sensation when I've focused, whichever area I focused on, felt cold. And as I moved away, I didn't notice the cold in that area. So it was quite interesting.
So you're kind of noticing that cold coming and going as your attention was shifting from place to place. And was that something that was comfortable or kind of uncomfortable?
No, because I associate cold with pain. I didn't like it.
It's a real kind of not liking
interesting.
of that. So how was that, knowing that it was just going to be legs and we're going to be all done when we'd kind of looped around the legs? Did that feel kind of reassuring in that context? Or
yeah, because when you mentioned doing it on the upper body, that didn't feel cold.
Oh, so you might have welcomed that. Thank goodness we've got away from those cold legs and I'm in kind of warmer place. Yeah, interesting. Thank you.
Tim, I wonder if you could say something in relation to fitting this into established programs. Shall I say a bit more?
Yeah, please do.
I've been teaching mindfulness for a couple of years now, and I, partly from my own experience through trauma and stuff, not getting on well with body scans until I learnt about TSM and then found out how to do them from that point of view. Now I'm training with a certain organization, and it's like, you know, they're very into, there must not be any program creep. You cannot teach a hybrid of this program. You are being trained to teach this program and not, you know, this program with bits added on or bits taken out, or you don't have the, that's the kind of general. So I'm just, for me, this is, and I'm not arguing back because I don't want to be argumentative, but for me, this is really important stuff.
Yeah. And I'm kind of, that's kind of what I want to do in the second of these body scan ones. I'm with you there, Rennie. In my own training, I struggled with that tension between what felt right for the group I was working with and the professional expertise I've developed for working with particular groups, and the wanting to receive a stamp of approval from an organization and the gateways that are open through that. And I think that's not unique to mindfulness training. That's an issue in all kinds of different training approaches. The thing I really struggle with this is I don't understand the educational rationale for saying that this kind of approach would be a deviation from the aims of a body scan. So I think there's a confusion about the ritual of the body scan and the purpose of a body scan. And I think that somewhere on the lines it's been lost to say what we're doing here is we're inducting everyone into a ritualized way of taking our attention through the body. And the underlying educational purpose for that, I think, has gone by the wayside.
Yes.
And I think that's going to change. And there's a sense of, thanks to the work of people like Willoughby Britton, David Treleaven, Lee Burrows, and others, that the kind of profile of that is getting much higher. But I think it's a really interesting conversation to say, if the aim of a body scan is about increasing embodiment and helping people rediscover a safe way of being embodied, and if the aim of a body scan is to be able to practice attentional redirecting, attentional focusing in and shifting and all of that, those are the two key aims that come out of the early practice of body scan. We might later weave in things like self-compassion and and distress tolerance, but initially that's where we're heading. It's kind of almost like, how did what I shared tonight in actually probably a shorter period of time than a typical body scan might take, and there would have probably been time to do the whole body in a reason, maybe like I did, I went whizzing up one leg, slow down the other at the time. You could do that, like go one arm, slowly whiz down the other, that sort of thing. I'm curious about how anyone would say that doesn't meet the educational and clinical aims of offering a body scan to a group of people. And I'd be really curious if anyone here would say what's missed out from that, and that would be helpful for me. And I think this is why I think there's something happened, that this has become ritualistic. It's become a token of what it means to be doing this particular form of mindfulness. And how does that fit with mindfulness when we're meant to be meeting our experience afresh and bringing a sense of how unique each moment is? The beginner's mind, would come to mind in this, perhaps. So I think there's a tension here through, and absolutely, I've got deep respect for John Kabat-Zinn and the people who originated MBCT. If it hadn't happened the way it happened, mindfulness could easily be a fringe thing that has no clinical credibility. So I absolutely get how important, particularly in research context, it is to have a minimal deviation from a clinical protocol. Yeah, absolutely get that. But I think it's also critical that people have the training to say, well, when I know how to do it in one way, but I understand the underlying aims, so that if I'm with a group who need to do things in a different way for their own well-being and they're maximizing their learning, I'm empowered to do that. And I think that's such an obligation on trainers to be offering understandings of how we can do that safely. And as I say, the I don't understand how something like this would be seen as deviating from the aims of a body scan within the first session of practice. So thanks so much for raising that, Rennie. And I think it's hard, and I really empathise with your position. I think the thing you could do, though, which doesn't deviate from the kind of offering the whole body scan, is really emphasising choice, that permissiveness, and to say it's a bit of a test drive. We're going to give it a go, see what happens. Make your choices about what you stay with and come out of. It's absolutely fine to move at any time, but if you do move, what's it like to move mindfully? Really notice the changes. So you can maybe do your setup so that you're giving as many permissions as possible for people. Maybe do it seated rather than lying down.
Yes, well, I would never do a body scan lying down.
Yeah, so that I think makes a big difference to people.
Yeah.
And with my particular phobia of eye bags, if there's any eye bags involved, let's not have the eye bags in our COVID-sensitive age, at least. So,
okay, thanks.
Cheers,
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Can I just look at the other things that have come in there? So it's really interesting. Someone, I think, saying they might zone out, kind of in the torso. So that kind of choice and permission. Yeah, and that sense of maybe being able to come in to one part of the body gives you you can notice what's happening there. Someone's saying here, I agree entirely about the benefits of chunking as opposed to fixed classic body scan, which can often trigger and alienate people who have endeavoured to learn new habits through mindfulness course, which are ritual informed body scans where safety steadiness is not underpinning the practice, without being accommodating within their window of tolerance, and they're likely to be triggered into further trauma. And that's I think that's a really sad thing, is that people, just to kind of conclude this really, is that if people have a negative experience, then are they in a position to know that this isn't what it means to practice mindfulness and there are other options? And that or actually, do people want to learn just to grit the teeth? I've had so many people who just say, I just learned how to kind of go all the way through a body scan, or they just dissociated off and came back at the end. And well, what's the point? Anyway. So so thanks ever so much. Thank you so much for those interesting comments. I hope that was a useful session for you. As I say, next time I want to pick up that whole notion of permissiveness, backing away from what feels too much, where we're forcing ourselves early on in practice, and then some later sessions want to dip back into thinking about more radical deconstructions of the body scan. Maybe something you can do once you're through your training, and all things are possible after that. So anyway, thanks so much, folks, and I'll be sending the video out around this in when I've had time to edit it in the next few days or so. So take care.
Thank you, Tim.
See you, folks. Bye.
Thank
The
you.
next session is 10th of June, I think. So, and so nice again just to see familiar faces from last time and elsewhere. Good night.
Thanks.